All right, a fair point there. Let me also get a perspective from Anupam Mittal, the founder and CEO of the People Group, who's also joining us here. In fact, he's in the studio with us. Anupam, lots of commentary that's coming in as we're counting down, and a lot of different thoughts on really, how best to provide a fillip or further boost to the ecosystem. Let me get your view.
Yeah, I think, I agree with Ronnie that funding is probably not the area that the government should be focusing on. Capital always finds its way to the most attractive pockets, so as long as we build successful companies, I think that'll happen. But I think a couple of areas that the government can really help in, and I think I would like to see, is perhaps, infrastructure and IP. So if you look at the West, or, let's just take the US as an example, and today we talk about internet-led companies building massive valuation, but if you think about the internet itself, it was actually a project that came out of DARPA, which is which is sort of a US defense organization, which ultimately created the infrastructure for building all these incredible companies. And it's all the intellectual property that's been available in the US, whether it came out from the government or whether it was built in research organizations in the US, that we are seeing all the incredible companies that are being built today on top of, right? So in India, we struggle a lot of times around things that are taken for granted in the West. So just to use a couple of examples, right? Today, if we had all kinds of land records or house prices and so on in a transparent, digitized format, you could offer a lot for value on a property portal, for example. That's something you take for granted in the West when you build companies around. Criminal records of people, right? That could help solve a lot of problems. I think Aadhaar and the United Payments Gateway certainly steps in the right direction, but I think we need to have a more time-bound fashion of when these will be implemented to unleash the entire set of potential. So I think these are areas that I would like to see some emphasis on.
All right, Sandeep, in terms of, again, learnings from what we've seen in the US, and we've had, in fact, the Prime Minister go on these extensive visits, try and form a relationship, try and bring back some of those ideas, and you have a lot of experience working there as well, so what do you think?
It's interesting. I think in the last 11 years I've been doing this, and one of the realizations I've come to is India is not the US and India is not China. Right. And so while that seems very straightforward, I think that even as an investment community, we tend to look at global comps and say, okay, this worked there, this should work here, that's easy, let's make that happen. And it kind of fits with that mentality of no one gets fired for buying IBM stock, or used to be that, right? And so when you look at it and you say, well, listen, the models for India have to be unique. We have 370 million odd people in this low income bracket. You have 170 million people in the middle income bracket. The shift in growth of people into the middle income is slower than we would have hoped, but it's a large base. It's a large base of people who are at a very low revenue base, and you can go after them, you can offer services, but it may not look like what it looks elsewhere. Right. We have an insanely fragmented economy. You have 94% of retail is fragmented, the kirana shop. In that environment, whether regulation exists or not, the marketplace model is the right model. Right. You want to enable those guys in. So I think there's a lot of value to learn from seeing what happens elsewhere. But I don't think that we can copy it. I think Anupam's point is a great thing. We have to find ways to create our IP here. I think if the government can play a role in facilitating the hardcore research that will enable things, that will really create differentiating technology going forward, that's fantastic. Because as investors, it's very hard to see where you're going to monetize that. And I think the government can have a much longer term view on it, and maybe those are the areas they can invest in, not in the e-commerce per se, but in the underlying technology that facilitates connectivity in different ways.
Right. Right. So technology continues to be the underlying key factor here, in all of this. Ajit, let me get your perspective as well on that, and how you feel that, what you really feel we really need to work on that front.
Today is a great day because the government has made a very grand statement of intent. But I think that there is one aspect of entrepreneurship or startups in general that we are not talking about too much, and this is important because it probably constitutes 99% of entrepreneurship, which is small businesses which are not venture fundable, which you don't invest in so that some investor, angel or venture capitalist or whatever, makes a capital gain. So this could be your neighborhood kirana shop, it could be a furniture seller, it could be rickshaw wala, etc. So if you look at that, or it could be a doctor who wants to set up a practice, wants to create a job, etc. If you look at all those opportunities, these are typically, most of these are not what a venture capitalist would invest in, because they don't offer linear or vertical growth, nor do they offer opportunities for exit. I think that when we think of making business easy, we should not miss out this 99%, which is very silent. It is a silent majority of businesses, and also pretty much like the fundable startups, they also are huge job creators. While on the other hand, we have the larger companies which continue to grow on the back of technology, etc., and thereby demonstrate jobless growth. I think it is the job growth is really, or the real economy is the startups, so let's not forget that.
Anupam's invested in the taxi company, Ola, right? I mean, you guys, so we've invested in a furniture company. It's interesting, I think that the technology side is disrupting those core businesses in such a level that I actually think that we have a chance to enable those types of companies, and they will evolve in a technology-led environment. And I think, I mean, Ola is a great example. You went into that so early, and at a time where you were actually saying, let's create a better taxi business, right?
Well, I wasn't saying that. I was just getting lucky, but some people were. And no, I think Ajit makes a great point. I don't think startups should be confused with funding. And I think that's what you're hearing most of the times when we go talk to people. That what about funding, right? Even today, all you are hearing about is funding, and I think that's a big mistake.
All right. So let me, we've also got both Rahul Chandras and Sanjay Swami and Ronnie Screwvala with us. Sanjay, let me bring you back in here, because I just want to go forward also on that, the entire tech, advantage and creating IP, the theme that we were talking about right now, and get your views on that as well.
Absolutely. Abha, I think right now in India, we are seeing the benefit of several things happening. On the one hand, we're seeing certainly in the tech space, with the combination of smartphone penetration, mobile internet, and cloud computing, we're seeing we're at a unique stage where we're going to get all of these global benefits to be made available in India, and that's the first phase of companies that we are seeing. The second thing that's happening, and Anupam I think talked about that, is India is very uniquely poised, right? So we had the opportunity to build something called Aadhaar, which is a one-of-a-kind platform. In fact, I had the privilege of both working on it as well as presenting it at the Federal Reserve in the US. And people are almost envious of the platform that we have built. And this is something that can really foster the next generation of innovation, which is not just to help India catch up, but also to leapfrog what's happening in the rest of the world. It's a really unique infrastructure that we have got, and on the top of Aadhaar, adding unified payments interface that's being rolled out right now by the National Payments Corporation. Adding electronic signatures, all of these things will make doing business a lot easier in India, and give us the opportunity to really differentiate our offering over and above the global trends. And I think the third thing that's happening here is, I also speak like Ronnie, both as an entrepreneur as well as an investor, with both hats. But I remember, 5-10 years ago, to explain to people what a startup was, and people would ask, if I work in the startup, will I be able to find a bride for myself? So I think we're past that stage. Entrepreneurship today is now a first-class citizen when it comes to the type of professions people want to go to. I think today's moment is the government sort of realizing that this is probably the ticket to getting the 10x growth that we have got in the telecom industry, but we have not got in financial services or banking, we have not got in healthcare, we have not got in education, we have not got in women's empowerment. And I think startups and some think tanks that go along with these startups like iSpirit or TIE or NASCOM are doing a fantastic job in helping sort of bridge the gap between the startups and the government. I think these are some big things that are happening right now, and technology is definitely going to be the only way a country like India is going to be able to empower the masses, and startups are going to play a key role there.
All right, absolutely. So technology.
I would also like to add that investment is not a problem. I think there is ample access to investment. And, I don't think investment is something to worry about right now. There are plenty of people like us and Ronnie and others waiting in the wings to back things that have the freedom to proceed unleashed.
Fantastic. That's always that's always music to you know, the ecosystem and the community and all the young entrepreneurs out there. Rahul, let's also go to you in terms of this whole question mark about the kind of funding, whether VC, angel, you know, what really entrepreneurs should look forward to, access to it. I mean, you know, you've in fact worked with so many, such a variety of entrepreneurs. So I just want to get your sense of, you know, what you feel works best, you know, where you feel perhaps there could be bridges that need to be crossed in terms of accessibility and finding the right match.
Sure, Abha. So I think the easier part is always once the company has emerged as a category leader and it becomes visible to investors both locally and globally. These are companies which have broken out and there is absolutely no shortage of capital for these companies. The real shortage of capital comes in the early stages when people are starting out. Every entrepreneur I meet, you know, either at a college or at a business plan competition, their first question is, you know, how do we get the first round of funding? And that's usually the hardest. And once you get that, it's much easier. And there are obviously, for every smart idea, there are many startups trying to get capital for the same. So I think the first round, the most risky round, where nothing is proven, where the entrepreneur has not taken the company out, where there is no revenue coming in, that stage is really the hardest. And of course, you know, we do see a lot of headlines in newspapers these days where there is announcement of large rounds happening and a lot of capital being raised. But fundamentally, between the early stages when the company is going through near-death experiences every now and then, and every large company today that we know of have been through those near-death experiences, you know, there is you know, hairline difference between surviving for 2 months or folding up. And you know, honestly, as an investor, we don't know what it means to fold companies in India, but it comes pretty close. So I think in the early stages where things are still very unproven, at least from a venture perspective, we do see that the ecosystem has not grown in those early stages. So you know, what has not to say that it has not changed in the last 10 years that I've been investing. There's been at least you know, a 50 times growth in the number of angel investors. Every startup that is successful, all their employees who make money when the company sells are eventually going to become angel investors. So the pool is building, but the number of qualified VCs, the number of VCs who understand technology, that number is not really increasing at the rate at which the ecosystem demands it. So I think there is a bridge which still needs to be crossed.
All right, Ronnie, let me come back to you. Come back to you as well. You know, again, from your experiences, as you said, you know, you are an entrepreneur, but you've also worked very closely with other entrepreneurs. And what are some of the key takeaways or the trends that you've really picked up or observed so far? And where do you feel there's still a piece missing?
I think maturity levels will take its own time. We're still at a very early stage, and I mean that in the most positive sense. I think a lot of the entrepreneurs today are challenged because I think part of them are building the company by their own vision, and part of them, because they're getting funding at such an early stage in life, are getting influenced strongly by investors. And my only fear on most of those counts here at various levels is really whether, at the end of the day, you know, my input to an entrepreneur is build a company with your vision. The investors are backing you and your vision. A half-half vision is not going to go through. So I think that's one big concern. But these are companies at a mature level. And I think, as we talked about, 90-95% of them are at a very nascent startup level. Those ones you would have to look at in a very different thought process, because it's not going to attract investors. As we all mentioned here, there isn't a concept of an exit for them. So they'll have to have a different level of nurturing. I think risk-taking ability is something that everyone needs to get used to. But I think the biggest one today is that we don't really talk about failure that often. And I think that seems to be half. If funding is one of the benchmarks for going forward and going that side of the fence, fear of failure is the other one for sort of half the people sitting on the fence and not going forward. And I think forums in India don't talk about enough about failure. I think we're starting to. I see a lot of that happening in the last couple of months, but at a very, very, very small stage. I think the more we evangelize failure, that's the first big boost to the ecosystem of startups.
You know, Kiran, let me bring you in here. The fear of failure, how big is that, you know, for an entrepreneur? How do you get past that? And as Ronnie was also just talking about, you know, funding too soon, too much too soon, you know, that's something that is a constant debate as well. You know, for you, you know, from where you're sitting, you know, how do you make that decision? How do you know how to balance that, you know, that growth versus profitability debate?
So frankly, fear of failure, I think over a period of time, the whole industry has also matured. There used to be a time when alternatives or being in a startup or failing was seen as a negative, and I don't think that's India anymore. We have a large influx of people who are doing a lot of things and are trying many new things, including in clean tech, in agriculture. These are sectors which typically people don't advise you to get into because they know that these are high barrier, high quote unquote lack of transparency kind of sectors. But I think that fear of failure is gone. People are I mean, I see young kids these days trying to do, seriously big ideas which can potentially change the way India functions. And I'm not talking about technology globe, I'm talking about India, food, agriculture, sourcing, distribution kind of startups. So fear of failure, I think having done a startup, up or down, is positive. I mean, it's not a trap in that sense. Of course, the risks keep increasing as the stakes move up from the early stage to the quote-unquote mature startup stage, where you have a lot of quote-unquote employees with you. The ecosystem is built. There are partners. There are stakeholders. Now that's when, that's a more mature organization, and they will have to learn and plan and scale up for that stage. I mean, that's the change or shift from being a 12 people organization to a let's say a 500, 600 people organization. That's a roadblock, or that's a transformation you have to go through. So frankly, being a startup, there's lots of conversations on funding, so I don't want to get into that anymore. So the way I see it, today, thanks to the government's big initiative day on this platform, I think we've moved from the first wave of travel. There are many, most of the people on the panel are entrepreneurs from the phase 1 themselves, who then became investors, and phase 2 has happened. And I think the next big wave will catapult India, or change the way India is going to function in the next 5 to 10 years. And I'm actually looking forward to that, and it's going to be a good fun time. And today's declaration, or today's festivities, is more like a big acknowledgement and endorsement to that particular change that is happening right now.
Right. All right, so Rahul, you know, the ecosystem is maturing. Perhaps there are new issues that need to be addressed, you know, rather than the older ones. In terms of sectors that we're looking at, where is the gap? Where is the opportunity?
So as we know, a lot of capital has already gone into e-commerce, and what it has done is it has created an ecosystem for the enablers of e-commerce to now come about and make it more efficient. I think this year is going to be the year of execution, as Nikesh also said separately. E-commerce companies are trying to become more profitable. They're trying to get to more positive contribution margins. And there will be a lot of companies that will go into making that happen. Better logistics, better last miles, and better analytics, just to make productivity play its role in making these companies more profitable. And of course, really big areas that are still yet to get going. I think we have tremendous power of, like Sanjay said, the combination of cloud and mobility in our hands. It's made everything very democratic. The cost of starting has come down. And everybody I meet has amazingly brilliant ideas. So what the two big areas that are yet to be disrupted majorly in India, healthcare and fintech. Fintech, we've already started seeing some early startups come about, which are making distribution of capital, lending platforms, which are making lending very capital efficient. On the other hand, healthcare, with the number of people that we have who need healthcare in India, traditional methods just don't stand to deliver the kind of healthcare we need going forward. We need a lot of data. We have platforms coming up. So I think the two big areas beyond e-commerce that we are beginning to see, healthcare and fintech, those are very ripe for disruption.
All right, Sanjay, I know you have a point, but we've also got the Prime Minister walking in, so we're just going to cut across and listen to his speech. A little bit of ceremony going on there. We've been waiting a while. In fact, everything's been ahead of agenda so far today at the event. We've been hearing a lot of CEOs speaking ahead of this big action plan. Well, the Prime Minister there leaving absolutely no stone unturned, almost echoing all of the wish list that we've been hearing from investors and entrepreneurs alike through the day. You can hear that resounding applause at Vigyan Bhavan this evening, and clearly, winning the vote there with the audience. Let's introduce, our Power Pack panel this evening to help to decode some of those announcements. We've got Anupam Mittal, founder and CEO of the People Group; Sandeep Murthy, partner at Lightbox Ventures; Ajit Khurana, former CEO of SINE, the IIT Bombay Incubator; Sanjay Swami, managing partner of Prime Venture Partners; and Rahul Chandra, co-founder of Helion. Suresh Shanmugam, the co-founder and managing partner of Sava Capital, also with us. Gentlemen, thank you all so much for being here today. And really, the first question I have to ask is, given some of the smiles that I'm seeing, he's really fulfilled a lot of that wish list, hasn't he? I mean, is the Prime Minister really going to be the new poster boy for the startup community?
I think absolutely you use the right word. He's certainly going to be the poster child as far as intent is concerned.
Yeah.
I think he's hit all the right chords. He's not left any issue that was on people's mind unaddressed. But to me, I think, maybe become a bit cynical living and seeing what happens in India. So I think to me, this all boils down to implementation. Right from the beginning, what is the definition of a startup, for example, right? Just in there, you could undo so much of the good that's been said. So I think what's required really now is to really create a cross-functional team with some of the top guys in the ministry to make sure that we see some of these things through. But otherwise, it's going to be a terrific shot in the arm for the startup ecosystem.
Rahul, let me bring you in as well. Would you agree of, pretty much answering or addressing all those key concerns?
Absolutely. I think this was, as you said, it's a wish list come true. I think the number of things that got announced, each of them equally powerful. To me, I think the one which is pending in the Parliament, the Bankruptcy Act, which will make a big difference to how startups shut down, I think that will be a game changer. Amongst the others, I think the capital gains exemption for reinvestment of income from other businesses into startups, I think that's great channelization of capital into more risk. I think that will pull a lot of capital which is going to otherwise go into unproductive assets into something which is going to be more productive. I think all of it boils down to, again, to his key message, which is what he said in the beginning, which is this is being driven, or this is being done so that the one key thing that people keep in mind while doing this, that this is not about money, it's about the compassion that you have as an entrepreneur to make the change that will make a big difference in the country. The labor that it generates, every youth has an ability to see a power in himself to change, or in herself to change the country. And these were all very, very powerful announcements. So really a lot of wish lists coming true.
Sanjay, what stood out to you? I mean, what were the key takeaways for you? Yes, everything was referred to, but what do you feel will make the maximum impact?
Yeah, I think there are really two categories here, Abha. One is things that are going to change existing rules within the government that are going to facilitate life for the startups. And then the other are new policies, and new, funding institutions, new initiatives. So if you look at it from the two segments, I think in the first category, and I made a few notes, the whole concept of self-certification, right? I think in India, until now, it's always, you're guilty and, you have to prove your innocence. I think now we're going to a mode saying, hey, for the first 3 years, it doesn't really matter, let the companies function, in some ways, let's trust them to be honest, and there's not much they can do negative in the first 3 years. But if they do survive those 3 years, then it makes sense actually for for the government to go beyond sort of a self-certification. So that I think is a major mindset shift that will remain to be seen how it's implemented. The second one was the whole mobile app, single window, the portal. As I was saying earlier, it's a 2 to 3 week process even to find a name for your company, and that's why you have these funny names which are the legal names that have nothing to do with the brand of the business. I think providing this real-time feedback will really help people to streamline how they actually interact with the Ministry of Company Affairs and what have you. So that was very significant. One thing which I talked about earlier as well, I'm really delighted that there are going to be some standardized norms. The ability for startups to be able to sell to government, right? That's always been an issue in the past. And government, if we are going to create companies or invest in companies as investors that are going to fundamentally alter and improve quality of life for the masses in India, the government may end up having to be a vehicle through which these developments can reach the masses, and so it's critical for startups to be able to sell to government. So I was delighted to see that particular point as well that was brought up. I think it's very important. It's a very broad, overarching plan, and that, to some extent, that worries and scares me a little bit. I would like to have a plan that is easy to implement for the government, and in some ways, it'll be. I think the challenge for the government is going to be: can such a broad, overarching plan be implemented in a rapid time frame so that it can have impact? A few other things around IP rights and things like that. That's actually good because we also want to attract the world's best companies to do their innovation here in India, and those were a few welcome things. It remains to be seen how they get implemented. But overall, I would say on the surface, by intent, absolutely an A+ for our Prime Minister today from our industry.
Right. All right, so let me bring Ajit and Sandeep here in as well. Sandeep, any skepticism there, as we've heard a touch of it from both Anupam and Sanjay as well, or broadly, are you quite satisfied with what he clearly said? He said, I know what startups want. I know they want me out of the way.
Yeah, no, look, I think that if you go back to when he came into power, nothing really changed on the ground immediately, but money started flowing into the country. What changed was sentiment. It was this feeling that, okay, life is going to be good. You have a person in power who has a mandate, who has a direction, who has a vision, and so money started to come in, lots of capital. In the last year, the amount of venture investments has doubled over the previous year and tripled over the year before, so it's growing. I think the good thing about this right now, and look, at the beginning I said as well, it was exactly that. We kind of operate in spite of whatever is going to happen here. We're going to have to keep doing what we're doing. I think what I liked about it was it maintained the positive sentiment. So now, I think everyone's absolutely right. The proof is going to be in the pudding of the implementation of this. But I didn't get anything out of it that anybody else listening in the outside world would look at and say, oh my God, I can't do business in this country. I can't invest here. This is going to be too risky. If anything, there's more optimism. So I think it's a step in the right direction on the sentiment side, and that's exciting. I'm kind of open. If it happens, great. If it doesn't, we'll move on. We'll keep doing business. We're going to keep investing. We're going to keep having to build our businesses.
Guys.
As I was saying earlier, Sandeep is the glass is half full.
Seriously.
The way I look at it is, think of the 1,000+ entrepreneurs who are seated in the audience. The first impression that I get is when they're listening to him, they're saying, this guy gets us. Okay, not just as he make these announcements. The second thing is that other than some skepticism that may come around implementability, which we'll keep aside because it's been addressed, I think that my biggest sore point in all of the startup space was this concept of angel tax, where investment gets taxed as opposed to profit, which nobody has a problem. So Jaitley as well as Modi have specifically said that they're doing away with that.
Got it.
The fact that they're bringing in parity in capital gains between private equity, which is startup equity, etc., and public stock, more or less parity, where there you don't pay capital gain if you hold for 1 year. Here, from what I heard, you don't pay capital gains tax at all. I think that was a surprise bonus. I am worried about what I understood was a tax break for startups for 3 years. Okay, because I've seen that all tax breaks, barring IT tax breaks, which did the country good, but my belief is that tax breaks in general have not done good to any sector or any economy, and they're always misused. Finally, again, I go back to the theme, it goes back to implementation. helping people get patents is fantastic. But who's going to defend your patents? Right. Are the courts equipped for that? Are the laws equipped for that? Have we demonstrated any ability to implement our contracts, leave alone our patents?
Right, and if I'm going to bring you in here, because I know we were talking about tax earlier as well, I want to know what advantages and disadvantages you see of what was announced today.
Yeah, so I think, the tax incentives, so there are two types of taxes here. One is simply the capital gains taxes that everybody's been talking about, and the government spoke about taking away some of those to incentivize startup investing, and I think that's a very, very welcome sort of announcement. It's going to enable a lot of companies and individuals to come in as investors, especially in that very critical early stage where venture capitalists don't play, where the first round of capital is required between the 5 lakh to, let's say, 50 lakhs of investment. So I think that will really mobilize a lot of funds and incentivize a lot of people to invest. The other part of taxes, as Ajit was saying, one was simply the sort of tax on investing, right, which they spoke about doing away with. And the flip side to that was not being able to actually book losses for the investments that didn't work out, simply because in India you cannot shut down companies. So what do you do about the investments that you've made but you cannot write off, right? And that imposes kind of a double taxation on you, whereby you're taxed on your successes but you cannot take a write-off for your failures. And he addressed that too, which I thought was very pleasantly surprising. I didn't think that he'd go into that level of detail. So I think lots of great stuff here. For me, the big takeaways are in 2 buckets. An overall tax incentive, as well as some sense coming into the taxation of capital investing as well as exiting, as well as ease of doing business, right? Clearly the 2 or 3 things he spoke about, whether it was the mobile form or IPR lawyers and so on, this is all around ease of doing business. And I think everybody understands and recognizes this is a much needed, I wouldn't even say vitamin, but a painkiller that we need to implement as soon as possible.
Absolutely, a lot of relief, I think, coming in across the board, that at least there's a recognition that this is what the community needs. We've got a power-packed house here tonight, analyzing the Prime Minister's startup action plan for you, but we do need to take a break. We'll be back and analyze some of those key announcements in greater detail. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back. We're analyzing the Prime Minister's Startup Action Plan. We've got a power-packed panel here for you today, live, that is addressing some of those announcements. Anupam Mittal, Sandeep Murthy, Ajit Khurana. We've got Sanjay Swami and Kiran Murthy. We'll also have Ash from Sama joining us in just a couple of moments, and of course Rahul Chandra also still with us as well. Gentlemen, thank you all once again for joining us on this. We've been breaking this down. Kiran, I haven't got a comment from you yet, so let me first go across to you and get a sense of how much you feel, how much of a boost this is going to give to operations going forward. There is a little bit of skepticism that's still come in from some of the other panelists in terms of execution and how that's going to work out.
Yeah, so frankly, what excites me most is the broad basing of the ecosystem, and the initiative to get school kids involved, colleges to set up research parks, incubation centers, government funding for creating those centers where research institutes will open up their doors for startups to go and use technology, tinkering labs. Frankly, while those are not very monetary or tax related or might not be industry request based, I think that will create a larger base of more startups coming into the ecosystem, which will change the way startups are growing or have been evolving in the past. And I'm actually very excited by that piece of announcement. Seems a lot simpler to execute because I think institutions want to build that ecosystem, and just a government support for them to do that would actually help. The IIT Madras Research Park, which was spoken about, is actually quite an exciting place. So I'm actually quite excited by that part of it. Of course, he's touched a lot of topics, and I think he's made a lot of people happy today. So the sentiment is clearly plus on the side of the table.
Right. Rahul, coming back to you, talking about some of those sectors or areas that, he talked about trying to boost the biotech space in particular, for example. What did you sort of think about that and his focus when it comes to women and students and R&D? Like he really spread himself, in terms of addressing all of these areas.
So obviously, Abha, I think there has been a lot of input that has gone in. We have been speaking to the ministry. There's been a lot of industry participants who've been giving inputs, and hence the speech was so relevant in terms of what was needed. And it covered so many constituencies that it is not surprising that it is so wide. And of course, with anything so grand and so important, there will be buckets which are more practical to implement in the short term, and some which are more direction setting. In terms of the areas of investment, I think the calling out of these specifically, and in the beginning he talked about how to even involve the farmer community in the agri-produce into what is a big part of our consumption, which is aerated drinks. I think combining all of these, it ties up very nicely to what the country needs. And I think he was shifting attention from what is usually in the front pages of newspapers, which is e-commerce. I think he was talking about handicrafts and farm agri-produce as well as biotech. So I think in general what he was doing is applying the principles of startups with or without with the core use of mobile technology or cloud into so many various areas. I think specifically about biotech, there are pockets of excellence which need to be created around that, and it is again such a domestic topic. It is not a search engine or a social network which is going to be global. I think this innovation is so specific to India, and it is absolutely necessary to find local centers of excellence which are working on issues. And again, like I said previously, there are some problems which are not solved in 1 or 2 years. These are problems which will take 6 to 7 years to perfect and test out and prove themselves. And biotech is one of those areas. I think it needs a lot of research, and that's again the beauty of this goal, which is to take it to something which is very far out in terms of the quality of skills that you need and the kind of input that it needs. So it's not talking about just execution plays, it's talking about hardcore IP and high impact areas like biotech.
Talking about that, Sanjay, let me come back to you. He of course, as usual, had some, coin phrases there, things to take away, talking about YP versus IP and so forth, and trying to, of course, look at the entire patent system and make it a little bit easier. But again, the question of implementation does come up, particularly in that space. When he's talking about reducing the fees, when he's talking about fast tracking them, do you really feel it's going to bring us to par with what we're seeing in some of other regions around the world?
So definitely in the case of IP, actually to me the biggest thing is, can we fast track, right? Because what ends up happening is the life of a startup where it needs to capitalize on any intellectual property that it's created, that needs to happen in 9 to 24 months. And if we can really accelerate the granting of the patent rather than just being in the patent pending condition, that's actually what is most attractive. Actually, the fees are not that significant or relevant, though it's good to have them reduced. But I think the processing of the patents and granting of them and making them enforceable, that is very, very significant, because larger companies in general tend to say whatever, when you say I have a patent on this concept, unless you have actually got it granted. What it will also mean is if something can be granted in, say, 12 months, right, now people will be more motivated to actually invest in filing for IP as well as doing more innovative things, rather than just saying let me do what the market tells me it needs. So I think thought leadership and things like that will come into play a lot more, because there is now an opportunity to monetize it. So I think this is a starting point. If the processes can be significantly improved, I certainly as a both an entrepreneur as well as an investor in startups will encourage a lot of people to start filing for patents. So that is one. Now, one thing in India is everything happens at a ginormous scale. So once this starts becoming the norm, and once people realize that this is highly monetizable and it's going to create disproportionate enterprise value, then I think it will start creating a lot more IP creation in India, and we can turn into a hub pretty rapidly. But it is I would say 3 to 5 year impact. It's going to be 3 to 5 years before we see a meaningful impact.
Right. Kiran, when you're talking about, for example, he's talking about the bankruptcy bill, he's talking about an easier exit policy, for instance, and so forth. Do some of these regulations for you make a significant difference? Again, we've been talking a lot about execution, implementation, so forth. But how high on the list of priorities were some of these regulations for a company like yours?
So, frankly, I mean, we need the fine print is more important. I mean, the intent is there to make things simpler, and that's coming through very clearly, and that's actually adding into the sentiment that is already being echoed. The specifics, have to be explored. Specifically for company exits, especially in the startup space, it's more more investor or investment specific rather than entrepreneur specific, because the shutting down of a company is not I don't see some immediate impact happening there, at least from entrepreneurship, encouraging people to start trying to start their own company kind of area. I don't see that happening yet.
All right, so just coming to my studio guests for a moment, and I know we guys have been also throwing up some of these topics behind the scenes. So just again, when we're picking up some of the highlights there, what else? Yeah.
I have something which is exciting to me. This is a secret, and I'm sharing that only because it's just between you and me.
Okay, and so of course all the people that are watching.
So the reason this is a secret is because it may not be very politically correct, but there is a certain elitism in the startup space. For example, if you look at startups that get funded, the founders who started it tend to be from a very select group of institutes, more often than not, and people don't want to talk about it. So one of the things I liked a lot about this, the announcements that we just heard, was this whole thing about broad-basing the incubators, broad-basing tinkering or tinkerer's lab, etc. And I must tell you, these labs, these facilities already exist in the super premium institutes. Okay. The fact that he's now saying we'll set up 18 of those and 13 of those and set up 8 more of these actually allows the movement of entrepreneurship to be broad-based, and if that can be implemented, I think it's just absolutely fantastic.
So it's bringing in a whole new spool of people.
Adding to that, I thought one of the very interesting points he made, which again took me by surprise, was talking about teaching entrepreneurship or innovation is what I think he said in schools. And this is, very interesting because, you go to school and you learn subjects like science and people go on to make some people choose science as a profession and make incredible scientific discoveries that changes the course of the world. But entrepreneurship, as we've seen, and innovation are, I guess innovation comes from science too, but just from an entrepreneurial innovation lens, these things change the course of the world as well. But we don't have enough emphasis in our school education system to even start to inspire children to think like that. And something so simple, even if it's taught at a very basic level, at least gets people thinking in that direction. And that was very, very positive to me. How you implement that, I don't know, but just the intent there was very
encouraging. The fact that he's encouraging, the fact that he's also saying that I don't want people to be afraid of failure, it's such a huge mind space shift, in fact, from what we've been tuned to.
Yeah, prepared really, really well. I think kudos to his team as well, who've taken all the inputs from industry and set this up really well.
He seemed to be really in sync. I was worried for a moment that perhaps he had a fly on the wall when it came to the studio, because it's almost everything we spoke about.
I think if you take this as the first of many such announcements that will happen year on year, and this is a move by the government to generally start to encourage entrepreneurship, get involved in ensuring that this community grows, it had to be broad. It was the first time we're coming out and really talking about this. So I think in fairness, while we've been skeptical, critical about is this going to get implemented, how will it happen, I think it was the right move to be broad in saying that, look, we're going to try to address a lot of stuff. Now, it's right because it makes everyone feel good. And now we feel good about life. And now you kind of say, look, if in general we can make movements in this direction. If the general momentum keeps moving in this way, fantastic. There's some easy ones, the tax things, you know, these are just functional. You do those, knock those off. Then you start implementing, like Anupam saying, if you can start getting educational systems moving. Because you look at the very nature of the problems. Healthcare, education. These are not going to be solved in a 2-year period. So the nature of the problems that people and entrepreneurs are going to go after are going to be multi-year. So it's fantastic. Let's have a view on all of them, and then let's start working together to move it. And I think it felt very inclusive. It felt like, like I said, it generated the right feeling. So
got it. And the fact that it had, you know, I didn't expect him to actually unveil a document. To me, whenever something is presented in some sort of written format, it just carries that much more weight, right? Things that get written down tend to get done, right? And the fact that he unveiled this document with an action plan just raised that much more confidence in me personally that some of these things will get done.
All right, Ajit?
So, you know, I think we overall are all very optimistic, so let me give you the flip side.
Wait. It's so great to have all these smiles and then this happy mood.
Right. So you don't want me to get rid of
we finally got it. We finally got the smiles going.
But having said that, let me give you an example of things that are areas of concern.
Okay.
At one point, Prime Minister said that startups will be exempt from paying tax on their profits for the next 3 years, and that's what we are showing down here in our screen also. Now my question is, are they defining startup in a specific way, or is it every company formed hereafter is exempt? Now those kind of questions and what is the answer to those can be very scary to me and can actually derail the entire proposal, which otherwise sounds very interesting, right? So I think that it keeps going back to the fact that, hey, some sore points were addressed, angel tax was removed, capital gain parity is going to come. Some intent has been made very clear, but there is still a lot to be seen.
All right, you know, before we continue this, and I know there's lots more that we're going to talk about here, we've actually got a comment coming in from Jayant Sinha in conversation, in fact, with my colleague Ashutosh Kumar. Let's listen in.
His destiny is to be the entrepreneurial engine for the next 6 billion people on the planet, to be a major contributor to the growth.
Okay, slight problem with the clip there, but we will go back across to it in just a moment and get his perspective on some of what was announced today as well. You know, but just taking out from what Ajit just said, in fact, let me go back across to Rahul as well. Rahul, you know, we find. All right, we will go back to Rahul in just a moment. But coming back to the smiling side, but no, it's taken me a while to get them to smile, right? They were really skeptical to start off with.
We are converged.
No, we're all about the optimism. We're about the sentiment. See, I said at the beginning, it's not about the details. We'll worry about those in time. I think that the sentiment was created in the right direction. And I think that, look, at the beginning we actually talked about this. It's about experiment, fail, learn, repeat. You can now create a framework that kind of believes in that. You say, okay, look, I'm going to let you fail. I'm going to encourage you to have the Prime Minister. If you're, actually just think about it, if you're a family sitting there and the Prime Minister saying, I want to celebrate failure. That's fantastic. The kid who wants to be an entrepreneur tomorrow and the parents say, you're going to fail, he says, the Prime Minister wants me to. I'm not sure he wants you to fail, but he's okay with it. He's okay with this idea. And so I think that, I forgot what I was saying earlier, it's a mindset shift required. I think Ronnie was saying that earlier. It's a mindset shift required. And it's happened over the last 11 years. And I think things like this will accelerate it. And I think it's, so we're going to continue smiling.
That's a great point. I think entrepreneurship has kind of become, you know, pretty sexy in the last couple of years with all the role models that have been created and funding that's gone. And well, that's a great point. The Prime Minister actually saying it in people's living rooms just broad bases it so much, right? Every second person. I mean, you know, and we keep confusing funding with startups, and so we see only this one side of startups. But startups, every guy is setting up a small business to sell furniture, to your point, or clothes, or sweets, or chai, and to sort of get in there and, you know, take that position into people, reflect entrepreneurship in a way that is very positive, I think is going to work wonders.
So I'm going to come back to everyone's favorite topic when it comes to entrepreneurs, and that's also funding, right? And the reason I bring that up is, while all this is great in terms of making it easier to set up a business, the funding element continues to remain critical. And the timing of this, a lot of talk right now going around with regards to valuation, funding slowing down, or not slowing down as such, but maybe getting a lot more picky, for instance. Okay, I'm going to get your comments on that in just a moment, but we do have that interaction with Jayant Sinha. Let's just listen in.
It's a historic day for India. India's manifest destiny is to be the entrepreneurial engine for the next 6 billion people on the planet, to be a major contributor to the growth and development of the top 1 billion as well. And today we have laid the platform for doing that in a way that is truly unprecedented. We had sat down and worked through all the pain points that our entrepreneurs are facing, and I think we've solved all of them.
Sir, a lot of initiatives have been taken on the tax front. Has the finance ministry actually worked out what will be the outgo in terms of the concessions that have been granted today?
We've obviously worked through all of the tax concepts, and we've been considering them and analyzing them for quite a bit of time. Of course, they'll all be included in our budget assessment.
Right, sir. Sir, you also mentioned in your panel, you discussed about the bubble that may be emerging out. What is the sense of the government as far as this so-called bubble is concerned? How are you looking at actually?
Obviously, valuations are set by players in the market. They decide what the valuation should be, and those are compared against benchmarks both domestically and around the world. So we don't get involved in that. That is what the market decides. However, when bubbles have burst around the world, whether it was in 2001 in the US or in 2008, there have been adverse consequences. So we watch all of this very closely to make sure that there won't be an adverse systemic consequences.
Sir, one last question, sir. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has asked the entrepreneurs to come out of the mold of the IT sector and look at the new vistas. Now, what these new vistas could actually be, and what are the sectors that the government is looking at prominently to provide its support and its fillip to those sectors?
Honorable Prime Minister spoke about many of the sectors. Many of them were discussed today as well. They include energy, they healthcare, obviously agriculture, education. So there are many sectors where there is still a lot of untapped potential, and that's why we have been emphasizing the creation of a domestic venture capital industry that will enable our companies to work on Indian problems, and that's why we have really strengthened the India Aspiration Fund.
By when will the fund be ready, sir?
All right, Jayant Sinha reacting to that action plan. We've also got Ash Lani joining us, managing partner and co-founder Sava Capital. In fact, he's joining us live from the US this evening. Ash, great to have you on the show along with our other panelists here tonight. We have been trying to strip bare that action plan and understand, how beneficial it's actually going to be. Let me get your first thoughts on some of those, key points that he kind of ran through. He seemed to cover everything from taxation to regulations and so forth. What did you make of it?
Thanks for having me. First of all, I think, since the Silicon Valley visit that the Prime Minister made, there seems to be a true intention to try to help startups. So the good thing is the intent is there to make things easier, to encourage startups, which eventually leads to more job creation for the country. So the intent is there, which is a good thing. In terms of the announcements today, I think obviously there are three paths a company takes. There's a startup phase, there is the maintenance phase as a company grows, and the growth phase. The third is the exit phase. Looks like they definitely want to try to help all three segments, but still a lot of the announcements today are still broad. I think we need to dig deeper into the details and really try to understand, what issues have been addressed and what still have to be addressed. But the good thing is, I think this is going to be a work in progress. It's not going to be resolved overnight. But I'm glad to see that they're thinking of addressing the startup phase, the growth phase by addressing taxation, and last but not least, making exit easier. But I still think we need more details to really deep down into what has been done and what the real actual changes will be. And I think some of this will have to wait till the budget, because that's when I think the taxation and the financial changes will be implemented.
Okay. Ash, we actually have some of your friends here on the panel tonight. Let me just reintroduce everyone as you've just joined in. We've got Sanjay Swami, Sandeep Murthy, Ajit Khurana. We've got Anupam Mittal. We've also got Kiran Murthy with us. And Anupam, in fact, was lining up those questions for you before you came.
I got a question for you, man, Ash. Last time the Prime Minister visited the Valley, I think you doubled the size of your fund, right? Do the announcement today make you double it again? Will it be easier for you to raise money from your LPs?
Well, I think, look, anything that makes business easier for startups in India makes raising money for venture funds easier, right? The good thing is we want to promote a friendly environment for venture investment, for startups, which I think eventually helps the industry that's investing in India, and also helps over time create a domestic venture capital industry, and also facilitate angels investing in India. So I think overall, any positive news is good for us. We've been investing in India since 2006, and obviously it's just been getting better, but we need more action.
So you're going to be writing bigger checks?
Anupam, I already written one to you, so...
All right.
Proof's in the pudding.
All right. In fact, talking about venture capital, Ajit had an interesting point about venture debt as well. So let me bring it in here to explain that.
Okay, so here's the interesting thing. Simple arithmetic. Look at the total amount of money that is raised in capital markets, and I'm talking of the listed markets. Now look at the total amount of money that banks lend to businesses. Banks lend a very large multiple. The capital markets, all of it put together, is a very small number. What I'm trying to point out is, even in the entrepreneurial startup space, most businesses would probably do better with debt than with going through the process of issuing equity. And this is where the 500 crore rupees per year credit guarantee scheme, which has been announced, I think is probably one of the biggest features which has gone unnoticed. Because in the US we have this concept of the Small Business Administration, the SBA, which guarantees loans. Today banks and other financial institutions do not want to give money to startups because they fear they're never going to get it back. This has prevented the creation of a venture debt industry. But now if we can do it to 500 crores, and this 500 crores is the insurance element, which means it will have a leveraging effect maybe of a 5 to 10x. I think this could open the floodgates to an entirely new form of funding, which I believe can be much bigger than the entire VC and PE industry put together.
All right, Sanjay, I think you had a point to make as well. I'm going to let you jump in here.
Yeah, I actually had a question for Anupam. Are we going to see one of his competitors create a company tomorrow called Startup Matrimony?
I think it's great. The more the merrier. Now that the VCs are writing bigger checks, anyway, we can spend more on marketing.
But can I address the issue on venture debt? Because I don't know if you recall, but I was actually spent most of my career at Silicon Valley Bank, which is the largest venture debt lender in the globe today, and also we helped start the India venture debt arm. So from that context, I'll tell you, obviously debt is a great way to leverage equity and grow startups. Even globally, this is not a well understood segment, because providing debt to startups requires some unique skills and unique expertise in understanding the growth cycles. And credit guarantee definitely helps. But what we really want to do is lenders to actually truly dig deeper into these companies, understand growth patterns, understand risk patterns. And as Anupam will tell you, I think he has availed of venture debt before, you really need lenders who are looking at you as a business, understand you and your story and what risk parameters they're willing to take. I think pure credit guarantees might create unnecessary long-term implications if all that the bankers are relying on is a guarantee versus truly being able to assess businesses. So I don't know, Anupam, you've gone through this process before. Maybe you have some thoughts to add on that.
Yeah, I think, I think venture debt is an emerging investing vehicle in India. And but I think what we spoke about today was slightly different from the venture debt that we are seeing in the traditional sort of VC-backed companies. I think the 500 crores that the Prime Minister spoke about, and this is just my understanding, is probably going to go towards venture debt from the traditional banks that finance the small businesses that really need it more than sort of the VC-backed companies. So I think that's wonderful that that we can enable those.
I think if you're an entrepreneur raising money, I think equity is the last source of capital you want. In an ideal world, you were born rich. Otherwise, you'll beg and take money from friends and family, or you'll go to the bank and borrow. And if you can't, then you'll go get money from a venture capitalist. Because, look, and it's not because we're evil people. I mean, we're very nice, we're very supportive, very encouraging about these ideas. But the reality is, you're now having to merge your vision with somebody else. You're going to have to work with them to kind of align step by step. And you're going to operate on a different cycle. You may have a 30-year view, they may have a 10-year view. You may be okay with bumps in a certain way, they may want to push in a different way. All of these things are solvable, and they're great. And by the way, we add other value beyond just the capital. You know, we like nice people, we can help them with their business, we can work together.
Are you sure about that?
Can you just point out that when he's talking about how good these...
Nice
I know.
When he's saying these things about himself, he's taking off on Narendra Modi talking about self-declarations. So congratulations, you picked up on that.
Exactly, I'm trying to make sure that I'm declaring, because if I don't, then you won't, right? So, but I do believe that, you know, it's a good idea to have debt, it's a good idea to have the rest of the capital structure evolved, but it is very true that ultimately these types of business, and we've been talking very much in the back about tech businesses here. Tech businesses are very driven by equity capital because those other forms of capital are not available. If you look at entrepreneurship and if you look at the ecosystem, it's going to involve, as Ajit was saying earlier, the furniture shops, the taxi wallas. It's going to involve a variety of other companies. And so perhaps that debt fund goes towards ensuring those.
Oh, you forgot to mention you're a nice guy.
I'm a nice guy. Because you didn't mention it, you know. So.
All right, Sanjay, I'm going to let you also complete that point. I know you were saying something a little earlier. Sanjay? Yeah, I was just going to let you...
I think, you know, I think a lot has been said today. I think, can you hear?
Yep.
Yeah. And certainly just on the point of venture debt, that's not in place of necessarily, it could be alongside venture capital. But I think, you know, the point I wanted to make was, I think the first thing that the Prime Minister said, that the government's job is to create the environment and get out of the way, right? I think that, you know, it remains to be seen how well that can be accomplished. And all of us, whether it's the government, whether it's the venture capital industry, whether it's the angel investment community, we are all, at the end of the day, supporting casts in all of this, right? The entrepreneurs are the stars in this journey. And this is really about making things right for them. I think another way to look at the Prime Minister's speech was there were a few things he looked at which were, you know, what can I address with the swish of a pen, right, which is going to be immediate and that can have some immediate impact. And that was one category. The second was some sort of medium-term things that needed to be done, such as taxation and things like that also, which are policies that are a little broader. Or, you know, the Inspector Raj and things like that, which we are hopefully going to get away from. And then the third was sort of, you know, grassroots activities, whether it's around making entrepreneurship almost a formal course that's taught in universities, that's practiced, and we have seen some excellent examples, not just in the IITs, but, you know, with Startup Village in Kochi, or, you know, similar things in Gujarat as well. So I think one of the things that, you know, if we come back to the main topic for today, it was a really very balanced breakdown where there was some immediate impact, there was some medium term and some long term impact. The biggest thing we need to just make sure happens at the government level is the implementation of these, right? So the intent to implementation, and since it's going to touch so many different departments, the Ministry of Company Affairs, Ministry of Finance, the IT department, you know, all of these areas, I think, you know, it'd be good if, you know, organizations like iSpirit and TIE and NASSCOM work with the government, as they probably have already been doing, and just make sure that we get some results early on, right? Because I think the moment we see some results early, I think people are going to be more motivated, and you'll start seeing, you know, this turn into a virtuous cycle.
Okay. Rahul, I'm going to bring you back in because I know we lost you there for a moment, but, you know, we've been talking about a couple of things. We've been talking about broad-based inclusion, you know, and entrepreneurship that's now going to be something that is more easily doable, accessible for a wider basket of people, and even perhaps not just tech. We've also been talking about venture debt. So some of these themes that we've been exploring that I want to also get your thoughts on.
Yeah, sure, Abha. I think the venture debt point, again, I think as Anupam clarified, it's something which is already there, but, you know, it's something like student loans. Student loans are available to students, but they're so hard to access, and an impetus like this will just make a loan like this perhaps more easy to access. And it has made a significant difference in the past. SIDBI, for example, has been very instrumental in creating a lot of companies right from the mid-90s. We just haven't, it's not come in people's consciousness by and large. But for an average startup without access to venture equity, this kind of debt will be a great way to start off. There is, again, I think the most important message for me in the speech was, all about the, I think a panelist referred to the non-elitism of the speech, which is that it goes far beyond the IITs and it goes beyond tech. And to me, that is the most important thing. To me, a small school in the hills, which has very little access, where a student has never seen a drone, a student seeing that for the first time and what it does to his mind or her mind, and how that sets the foundation for future imagination. I think in the next years to come, by the time that child is ready to come out into the working life, I think this ecosystem is going to be tremendously supportive of what that child wants to do. So it's a dovetail of the seed that I think is being put in the mind of students, and what the environment is going to be able to do or provide to them by the time they're ready to change the world. So I think it's a great start.
All right, some great points there, Rahul. Ash, as we wind up, I want to get some closing comments from you, but I also want to, get a sense of perspective, from where you're sitting in terms of perhaps post the speech and given the kind of momentum that's built up since Modi's visit to the States, in terms of how India's entrepreneurial culture, the ease of doing business is being viewed from the outside, from the community there, what's really the thought?
No, absolutely. I think, as I said earlier, the good news is the intent is there. As part of the Thai working group in the Valley that was working on the recommendations, we saw the responsiveness by the government, the openness of ideas. And so I think all those are encouraging signs. In terms of the global view, I will tell you that, in our business, fundraising becomes important because we need, limited partners to invest in us so that we can invest in companies. And the environment for venture capital in particular has changed significantly from, I would say, a couple of years ago. One is they look at India as being more friendly towards businesses. Number two, they're looking at the fact that the startup environment has truly grown. The success of companies like, Paytm, Snapdeal, Flipkart, Oyo, all is helping the global perception that you can create large companies in India. The other thing is that we've seen recently some very good exits in the venture capital market, and that also sends a good perception. Obviously, everybody is always a little skeptical that will the execution happen, will all these different government agencies collaborate. But overall, the sentiment for venture capital and entrepreneurship and SMEs is very, I must say, is probably at an all-time high today than it was before. So obviously, we hope that over the next year, more money comes into India. But I think a year from now, we will look back and see was the execution done, and we have this window of opportunity over the next year to prove that we can be more business friendly, can raise more money to invest in India. But we have to deliver to be able to continue taking that forward.
Absolutely. All right. On that note, gentlemen, I think we've completely run out of time. I want to thank all of you so much for joining us and very patiently, sitting through the entire speech and spending pretty much your whole Saturday night. Well, there's still some left, but with us here today on Bloomberg TV India. It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you all very, very much once again. We've also caught up with a whole host of government and industry voices after that resounding action plan on ground there at Startup India in the capital. Listen into some of these views as well. Thanks for watching.
And I think it's a multi-pronged approach, which is exactly what we have also been recommending. One area where perhaps a little more could have been expected, and which perhaps could also still be addressed in the budget, we don't know, is on the relief given on capital gains for startups. How this would apply in case of domestic investors vis-a-vis foreign investors, for domestic investors vis-a-vis in large corporates, listed corporates versus in startups, and how it would be if it was reinvested in other startups and not only in manufacturing startups. So these are some of the areas where perhaps you'll have to wait for the budget and see.
Well, Indians are basically innovative. Jugaad technology is integral to India. Therefore, what the PM has done is to institutionalize the entire innovative spirit of Indians. He has appealed to Indians to innovate more. And he has said very clearly that failure is the first step of success.
Right.
So that is the new ecosystem developing in India. We're very proud of it.
Right.
And the kind of energy which the PM also repeatedly noted, which has been generated here, I see a reflection of the future which is filled with aspiration and hope.
Right.
This is fantastic. This is the very unique country with a great leadership to support the startup. This is unheard of. And the Prime Minister this much focus to support the startup. This is amazing.
I think it's the plan. It's all the pieces put together is a cohesive package for entrepreneurial people, for startups to just get going, to get started. And so I think it's a cohesive plan. It's not one versus another. Certainly, some of the tax exemptions were very exciting for a lot of people, but there's a lot of sort of regulatory streamlining and other things that are going to make startup life an easier life to get going. It's already hard. Making certain things easier is a big deal.
Powered by UV Vantage, an initiative by UV Can Ventures.